Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today, Brian and myself have some life training and nutrition updates, and then the main topic of the episode today is going to be around DEXA scans and comparing some data around previous scans for myself and some updated ones and just comparing some of the cool data we get from them. So, Brian, what is going on with you?
Yeah, I'm excited about the DEXA chat. It was cool getting in that little private DM with me and you and Dr. Dave McConey and kind of assessing some of that stuff and coming to some realizations. So I'm sure the audience will appreciate that once we get to that part. Before we get there, I have a bunch of updates on myself. I'll start with some interesting and not good ones, and then we'll move into some other training related stuff. So I think the first relevant update is that I'm continuing to have the nightmare vasectomy problems. And this time it's not even that I still have pain. It's that I just did my 4-week post-vasectomy check and I'm not shooting blanks. So all of this 4 weeks later, and apparently it didn't even work. So I'm...
Hold on.
yeah.
Fucking hold on. How? Is it like they didn't do the job right, or Brian has like super sperm that busts through the vasectomy thing? Like, how? What do you mean it doesn't work?
Well, yeah. So the Google machine is obviously the first place that I went to figure out what the F is going on. And essentially what can happen, and this can happen like relatively soon after getting the vasectomy, like within weeks, or it can happen in months, or it can happen in years. It's actually more likely to happen earlier, so like in a matter of weeks, where your body essentially like regrows a path for the sperm to go, because it's like, oh, this one's blocked, but like we have to get this shit out, so we're gonna like reform this path, this canal as they call it, and it essentially like averts the tie that was made.
Biology finds a way.
Super rare, super rare. Even more rare than that is the doctor messing the surgery up, because apparently it's a very simple surgery. So yeah, that's where I am right now. I put a call into the doctor today to let them know that I got my results back and that I'm not shooting blanks. So what's going on? And I'm just like, I'm nervous about, we're going to have to go in and like redo this thing, or like, I don't know what the next steps are, but I'm gutted. I've already gone through a period of healing that was longer than anticipated, and I'm not excited about potentially having to do it again. So I'll keep you guys updated and let you know about all that as it progresses.
So, okay. Do you know which of the two pathways is what happened with you? No, you just know that like you're not shooting blanks like you're supposed to.
Yeah. And they do say it's possible that at 4 weeks that you might still let a few creep through, and then you just, go another 2 weeks and you test it again and see what happens. So That will probably be their first course of action is, hey, let's test this again in a couple weeks. But if the body has formed a new canal, then I don't think that a couple weeks is going to make much of a difference.
Wow. That is unfortunate yet fascinating, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
What else you got?
I'm upset that I'm the N of one experiment that failed, Okay, so moving on. I on the couple episodes ago, I was talking about cramping in my feet and calves, and I was like, I'm taking all this sodium, et cetera, et cetera. So the update on that is that I haven't had any since that episode until last night. I had like a half one. I would call it like it kind of began to cramp up, and I shook it out and stood on my foot, and then it went away, and I didn't actually get a cramp. But that's a matter of like 10 plus days, maybe even 2 weeks now since we talked about this on the last episode, and I hadn't had a single issue. But now I have another thing popping up, and it could be related to the cramping thing, but I have pain in my left heel, and it popped up out of nowhere. Like, it's the weirdest thing where like the back of my left heel hurts, but it only hurts when I'm stretching my hamstring. It's like the craziest thing. I'm sure somebody's going to have some thoughts on this that's listening. Maybe Shantae can contribute some of her professional thoughts on this. But so I went running, as I mentioned. Did I mention this on the last episode that I ran a little bit? Maybe I just said it on my story. So I tested out my vasectomy, and I ran a little bit a couple days ago. So there's a side of me that's like, okay, I ran for the first time in 4 weeks. Like maybe I heel struck and I do have like a problem in my heel. The thing that's weirding me out about this is that it's only painful when I stretch my hamstring. So if I like go down into a squat, it's fine. If I do a calf raise with like deep stretch of the calf at the bottom, it's fine. But as soon as I go to like do an air RDL, or I go to like pick something off the ground that I drop and my hamstring stretches, it shoots this pain into my heel. So I don't know what it is. I'm going to spend some time this afternoon rolling out the back of my leg, like calf, Achilles, do the sole of my foot like you suggested before we started the recording. But it sucks. I don't really know. It's like I don't realize that it's there because it only happens when I stretch my hamstring. So then I go to like reach into the bottom cupboard to get out like my protein powder, and I'm like, and so I like don't realize it until it shoots this pain into my heel, and then I realize it, which is a little bit frustrating and something that I need to figure out. So those are my two kind of negative updates.
One thing that I wanted to follow up on, I wanted to message you this, but I forgot to. So after the whole cramping episode and that we talked about, I listened to that our friend Rachel Gregory, her podcast with
Rob Wolf.
Rob Wolf, yes. And one thing that was really, really interesting is he tried to like, of course it's a very difficult question to answer, so I think he answered appropriately, but he kind of started saying people should start their sodium intake around like 5 or 6 grams per day, which I thought I was like, oh shit, that is like significantly higher than I thought. So that was kind of
he sells a product that has salt.
So yes, massive kind of asterisk and caveat there. He does fully, sell a salt product. But it was just interesting because I thought, like I think I said I was around like the 5 to 6 grams, and I thought that would kind of be like the upper, not necessarily like an upper limit, but like significantly higher. I think what is like whatever that general RDI is, like 2 grams or something like that.
2.5, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Which generally is kind of BS in my opinion for a lot of things, but I was surprised to see that that's what he was saying for like a starting point, which was kind of wild. So maybe you drinking 5 of them per day, you're just the ideal client for him.
Since we talked about that, I have been paying closer attention to how many I've been drinking, and I average 4 a day, and some high days it would be 5. But I've never exceeded, since we discussed this, I haven't exceeded 5, and I don't think I ever did before that too. So that's 5 grams. And then I don't like heavily salt my food. So I'm sure I'm getting some in the food that I eat naturally, and I do salt a little bit, but I'd be surprised if I'm much over like 8 grams a day. Like I think that's going to be pretty standard for me.
Yeah. I just thought it was a fun update from that.
Yeah. So let's see, what other updates do I have? This weekend I'll be traveling to Santa Barbara for a wedding, and that'll be cool. We're taking the kids. It's going to be Vivi's first time on a flight ever, and Bryson's first time since he was like 1.5. So he flew like 10 times as in his first year and a half, and then we haven't flown since due to the world circumstances. But one thing that the Santa Barbara trip is doing is it's throwing off my training slightly because we're leaving on Thursday, and I'm on this like Monday, Wednesday, Friday full body program. And then I didn't think I was going to get my session in yesterday because our nanny just got her booster shot, and apparently it like floored her. So she didn't come in yesterday, but somehow I managed to fit my workout in. And over the course of doing that workout, I had a really solid squat session to start, and then I had a really poor deadlift session to follow. And what it did was it sparked a memory of mine from the last time I did deadlifts regularly back in like 2016, where I realized that I need to give myself a deadlift specific deload every 3 to 4 weeks. And I had forgotten about that going into this cycle. So I'm in officially week 4, but week 3 since I started kind of escalating weights. But it's right about the time where I would need that deload. So it's interesting that I had a poor deadlift performance. I didn't feel very like explosive going into it. It felt just like the weights felt heavy in the warm-ups. And so I kind of realized that, and I took it kind of easy on deadlifts this week. I did my back off doubles, but I didn't do my top single, which I think is where a lot of the fatigue kind of accumulates, is in that top single rep. And then the other factor that could be contributing to the deadlift is that I was up at N1 again this weekend. doing some more filming, kind of some follow-up like B-roll stuff for the last filming session that I did up there with Cass. And he had me doing a bunch of deadlifts and RDLs. So while they weren't heavy, I did do heavy RDLs on Friday as part of my training. Then on Saturday, before I even recovered from Friday, I was doing like light RDLs and light deadlifts for the filming. And then I was supposed to come in on Monday again and go back to deadlifting. So I don't know if it was the filming at N1 or if it was the fact that I really just kind of reached a point where I needed that deadlift specific deload. But I'm really glad that I kind of listened to my body, that I realized what was up, that I didn't go try to pull like over 455 knowing that it was going to be a grind. Kept with like some snappy 405 doubles and finished the rest of the workout super successfully. And now I'm here. So it kind of, makes me realize and think about it from the perspective of like the fitness fatigue spectrum, which is, what we learned about in the CrossFit L1, and the thing that really is the presiding factor that determines whether you gain muscle or like whether you're in an anabolic state or a catabolic state, whether your cortisol is high, like all this delicate balance of making sure that your fitness is higher than your fatigue. And, anytime that you progressively train, your fatigue is going to creep up slowly to the point that eventually it masks fitness. And the deadlift in both an acute sense, in that the deadlift itself is very fatiguing, but also in the sense of what the deadlift fatigue then does to the rest of the movements within your training are kind of two things that I think you need to be very careful of when you do have a heavy deadlift in your program, and especially the way I'm doing it, where I have a heavy deadlift one day and a heavy RDL another day. So you're hinging at the hip in that manner and putting a lot of axial loading on the spine through those movements and also through the back squatting. So there's just a lot of kind of factors that I think are at play that you need to be aware of in that balance of fitness and fatigue.
Yeah, and I think like something like an RDL and a deadlift is probably one of the best movements that expose that kind of paradigm, because it's like, I don't know, for me, like both of those movements are just incredibly taxing, like grip, lats, like it's just so much it takes to perform it, So I think that's like probably the best like example for that that paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just exacerbated, like the amount of fatigue caused by doing something wrong. Like if I did that top single yesterday, even though I didn't, but if I would have done that, I feel like I would have been exponentially more fatigued today. Like I would probably be feeling like low back stuff and just I probably wouldn't have slept well. Like all of these things, all because I would have done one extra rep maybe. So I don't know.
Yeah, kind of wild.
Yeah. So what's up with your life? What's going on with you? Hopefully more positive than my stuff.
Yeah, I would say it's mostly positive. I do have a little, I guess it could be, I'm viewing it as a negative. So the first thing I want to say is I'm hosting a class on November 11th. It's called When Fat Loss Fails. It's going to be free. By the time this comes out, it should already be up on my socials and stuff like that. I'll have a link. So I'm going to be detailing kind of some overlooked aspects for improving client outcomes. The target audience for this would be like other nutrition coaches, hybrid trainers type stuff, or like your general nutrition nerd type. So that's the category I found myself in before I started coaching. So should be really, really cool. So like I said, details will be up on that by the time this episode releases. And I'm excited to move on Thursday. We start our move. It's going to take us like 2 to 3 days to get down to Scottsdale. And the reason I would say I'm most excited, like, don't get me wrong, I've really loved being here in Utah. And I think now I have a plan or I should say we have a plan for when we're done traveling, where to move. But I've kind of gotten into like a little bit of a bad routine and rhythm here. And it has me training at night a lot. And I really just don't like it. So I'm excited because every time we move, like just by the grocery stores in a different spot, like, and things just change. They always change. Like every single place we've lived our life and our routine and structure, the time we go to bed, the time we wake up, like always changes a little bit. So I'm excited for that. And I'm going to set a hard rules, like no more lifting when it's dark out. I've just gotten into like these routines where I want to work and stuff like that. And then it's, I'm like, fuck, it's 8 p.m. I have to go to the gym. And I'm training from 8 to 10 p.m. and then it affects my sleep and stuff. So definitely excited for that, just to see new stuff, get some more sunshine. It has been kind of overcast a lot here, and just see somewhere new. That's kind of why we started doing this, just to see new things. And I have a handful of clients in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area, so getting to see them, meet them in person, get a hike in, get some coffee or something like that. And a couple of people that listen to the podcast have reached out as well, so that's really cool. Already have some things lined up there. So always just excited for change, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm jealous as well because as it gets colder here, like it's actually cold now. I think Halloween was like the turning point for us where it was like, 60s, then like some high 50s, and then it was like Halloween. It was like 38. And then today's like 43. And then there's like a few days, in the 10-day forecast, and you're like, oh, those look pretty good. And then it's like plummeting back down again. So we're like about to enter into the depths of winter, and you're about to go back to summer. So
yeah,
super jealous. And I'm glad you'll be training during the day because I for sure believe that sessions are more productive in the daytime as well.
Yeah, and it's just like getting that movement in and stuff like earlier in the day. I think like from a circadian rhythm standpoint, we're geared to perform better in any way. So I'm just excited to get back to that and really just get away from the bad habits I have created myself here a little bit as well.
Well, that's cool that traveling gives you that reset opportunity. I mean, what a great gift.
Yeah, it's much easier because everything's going to be new again. And then kind of tomorrow, I'm really, really excited about this. And this is kind of going to be our topic for today. I have a big day of testing tomorrow. So what's really, really cool is I've never had this at this kind of phase I'm in. So I'm right about at maintenance calories, probably a little bit under, but my weight has pretty much stabilized. And I'm going to have a full set of check-in photos tomorrow morning. I'm going to go get a full panel of lab work done and then go and get a DEXA scan right after. So it's going to be really cool to have like a visual, endocrine, hormonal, and then whatever you would call the DEXA scan, like, I don't know, hard numbers, snapshot of exactly where I am like right now, and then compare it to some other things. So I'm really, really excited about that, and I'll obviously share, some of this information as I get things back. Obviously, the photos and decks are a day of, and then labs will have in probably 5 to 7 days or something. So maybe by the time we record the next podcast, I might have everything back.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think like you mentioned to me off air, but I've never had a DEXA done before, which is crazy. Like I know you're surprised by that, as I think most people hearing would probably be surprised by that too. But yeah, I've never had one done. So I think I'm going to look into that. And I know that they're not like outrageously expensive. And I'm sure with the university nearby and stuff, there's got to be ample opportunities around here to get one done.
Yeah, they're generally around like $60 to $75, $80. Although in some cities I've looked, they're like $140, which is like literally double. So, but I mean, regardless, you get a lot of cool information, and then one of those things is it's cool to now like look back on, as time progresses and see different changes there. So, I mean, I highly recommend it. Tomorrow will be, I think, the 4th one I've ever had. So.
And you do them all fasted with coffee or water only, or what's the approach?
I would recommend doing them fasted. Yeah, just to remove, because like obviously you have some food the night before. That should be mostly through like your stomach, some part of your small intestine. It'll probably still be in there, but just reducing gut content, especially in that area, which is going to be like your, abdominal area, which we are going to be higher in body fat area at, just to reduce complexity of the machinery. So I would go in fully hydrated type of thing. I think black coffee should be perfectly fine. I will not be having any black coffee because I'm getting hormones pulled immediately before. But yeah, just making it as simple and creating as little variation yourself so that you can put more weight into the numbers that you get.
If you were to eat beforehand and do it fed, that extra mass in your body would show as lean body mass, right?
I would think so, but I am not incredibly versed in the intricacies of how the imaging takes place. Because those would be like inside your organs, right?
Yeah.
And it's basically like a density scanner, right? So it obviously shoots whatever waves type things and then determines obviously organs are a different density than bones. Adipose tissue is a different density than your organs type of thing. It should be considered lean body mass. I just, don't want to say
right
definitively and be incorrect because I really don't know.
No, for sure. I think the more important thing is just to do it the same way every time you do it.
Exactly.
Like, Yeah, just have consistency in that way. So that was kind of more where I was going with that question. But
Yeah.
cool. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we have a couple. Let's talk about it. So one of the things that this kind of kickstarted a conversation between, like you mentioned, yourself, me, and then our friend Dave McConey. Around, I posted that picture of us from a couple, not even a couple, many years back now at this point, coming up on 8 years, and said that I kind of made a joke that it was like, obviously, I weigh 24 pounds lighter now than I did then, which is like kind of wild. And you're probably damn near close to that too.
I would guess I was above 200, like 205, maybe 203 would be kind of my guess looking at that picture and that time period.
Yeah. And just, we were decently lean for being like, 205 or 203 to like 210 type of range. And then I know the comment we made is around like traps are obviously smaller. Back development is now. Correct. They are 100% smaller now. Overall back development is less muscle in the back, probably largely posterior chain type thing. And then Dave was kind of prodding with some questions. And I was like, I think I have like a DEXA from back then. It would be cool to see if I could find it. Fortunately, I didn't delete the emails, so I did have it. And I just have some of the data to compare, which is pretty cool. So it was about a year. No, the data I have is about like 3 years after that photo. But my weight had actually gone up because I was in my like kind of powerlifting phase there. And the kind of most wild thing is, even though that I'm 24 pounds lighter now, I only lost 4.9 pounds of lean tissue to lose that 24 pounds. So what's kind of just cool there is seeing like, even though I'm physically so much smaller, I have maintained an overwhelming majority of that. But so that's kind of the most interesting thing to me, and it's kind of like a pat on my back for hopefully, doing things decently over the years. But one thing I thought was also cool is my bone mineral content, which is on the far right here, Brian, is down 0.5 pound. And I think that really goes to show of that is relative to like your heavy lifting type of thing. Because I still train like heavily, right? I'm using air quotes here, but nothing comparatively to that time. And we know like that's where your bone mineral density comes from, is like the heavy training.
I almost think that 0.5 difference, though, that 0.5 pound difference is like insignificant, sort of. Like, I mean, you lost body weight, so I feel like that 0.5 pound that you lost in bone mineral content could just be attributed to being less body weight.
Do you think?
I don't. I have no basis for that, but it doesn't concern me, is like what I would say. Like, I still think that's fine. Like, if 9.5 is a good score, then 9's a good score too.
Yeah. I thought it was just kind of more interesting to see that. I wouldn't say it's concerning, because I know like 9 is still like incredibly dense for.
Yeah,
for
I don't know.
BMC.
I don't know if I'm right on that, but I would just say that like it doesn't seem like a significant amount. Like it isn't a lot. So I don't know. I guess I would need to do more research on that to see if that is a significant loss in bone mineral content or not. But where are you getting that you're 24 pounds lighter? Because I'm looking at the thing. It looks like you're 18 pounds lighter. Are you talking about it different?
You know what? Yeah, because sorry, I just know. So that's another thing that's kind of really interesting. I know I'm like 190, 191 in the morning, but that DEXA picked me up at 196.
196.
Yeah. Yep.
So you if this DEXA is 196 and you're now 190, then you would probably assume that you have less body fat now even than that one.
I'm pretty sure. I could actually look it up really quickly, but I'm pretty sure I was about like, I can actually tell you exactly what I was on August 5th. 1 second. August 5th.
The August 5th data is right there in the DEXA, right?
Yeah, but I weighed 191.5 in the morning that on August 5th.
And when you did that, you were 196.
Yeah.
Got it. So it is the same as I see where you're going with that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So one of the things we talked about with Dave that was really cool was like you were saying that your lifetime goal was to be 10% body fat at 200 pounds. And you were like, I wonder if I would be able to do that now. And Dave looked at it and he goes, I think you could just gain all fat and still be there. You just have to
Yeah,
get to
it's kind of
200
funny.
pounds. Like,
Yeah,
just go get to 200 and you'll hit your goal, you know?
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I think that I can literally just, once the gut protocol stuff's done, and just put on a handful of pounds and potentially be there, which would be really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly. How much longer is the gut protocol?
I am in week 4, so I'm like officially halfway there. So I'll wrap up basically at in the beginning of December, which I think will be pretty cool. But that's like the main part of it, and then I start introducing like foods and stuff again, and seeing what, if anything, causes any intolerances or anything like that. But like the bulk of it will be done in about 4 weeks.
Yeah. So I know you have experience with InBody scanners as well, and we both, hate them and don't think they're accurate really. But have you had any InBodies that were done a similar time or even right next to any of these DEXA scans that you would be able to say like the InBody said this and the DEXA said this, so here's the discrepancy?
Yes. So I have a DEXA from March or April, and when I was in Austin, and then 7 days later I went and got an InBody done. I only have the physical DEXA for that one for some reason. I don't have any of the like email data, because I did an experiment on this, and that DEXA put me at I want to say 10.9% body fat. And I was like, okay, cool. 7 days later, my weight was within a pound. I did the 7 days because I wanted to, it would be too far later in the day. I would have to eat and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm going to give it a week. I'm going to follow the same training thing, take the day off, type of deal. And the InBody put me at like 14.4% body fat or whatever.
Oh.
And right there, I was like, oh, wow, InBodies are garbage.
Because InBody's always had me lower, which is like, to me, I'm always like 7 or 8% on InBody. I'm like, I'm not 7 or 8%.
Yeah, that one was really, really wild for me. And I was like, within, a pound, I did it at like 9:30 in the morning, like same time, fasted, and it put it like considerably higher. And I was like, oh, like, okay. Like I literally was kind of pulling for the InBody. That I was like, okay, I've controlled my external variables. Like this should be I thought it would be pretty decent, but it was like wildly off. So that was pretty eye-opening for me. And while I think it still can be beneficial, like let's say you're someone who goes to the same gym and you like live in the same place for like years at a time, and you always use that same InBody, I think that can be beneficial, especially if you're controlling or minimizing your variables. But I was a little bit disappointed in the variance was that wide.
Yeah, I feel like if you do the InBody consistently and you emulate the same conditions going into it, that it's kind of the same idea as like taking skin fold measurements but not associating them with a percentage of body fat. Like, oh, my supraleic was 15 millimeters and now it's 13 millimeters. It's like kind of the same idea with the InBody, because I do think that it would be relatively accurate as long as you do kind of keep those conditions the same each time. Like you should get a decent number for yourself, even if it's not accurate to what a DEXA would be. My experience with the comparison of the two, since I haven't done a DEXA, is I want to say it was like 2016 or 17 when that hydrostatic weighing truck would always be like driving around PB. I did one of those, and we also had a nutrition store next to the gym at the time that had an InBody scanner in it. So I did the hydrostatic weighing one day, and then like a day or two later, around the same time in the afternoon, I went in and did the InBody. But the thing with both of those that I did is they were both done fed in the afternoon. And so I don't exactly know how that affected the results, but I ended up being around 13% on the water and like 8% on the InBody.
So it's like half.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like 60%. Yeah. But it's lower on the InBody, whereas yours was lower on the DEXA. So who knows, man? I think the one thing with the InBody is that you can manipulate it so easily. Like we were talking about whether the DEXA picks up food in your stomach as lean body mass, but literally the InBody does. Like I one time went into the InBody and did it fasted, and it was like, 12% body fat or something. And then I ate a massive plate of like chicken and rice, and I was like so stuffed. And I went in and did the InBody again, and it was like 7.5%, because that food all just showed as lean body mass and made my body fat percentage seem smaller or whatever. So, so you can definitely manipulate that thing if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I think kind of what I wanted to talk about here is like one thing is with kind of the more expensive things are, right, the general better accuracy you're going to get, which is kind of like a theme for life. But like you said, with like the skin fold calipers, especially if you're someone who has one of those like scales, right, that will give you like a bathroom scale that gives you data, I wouldn't put too much in the number. But if it's like getting larger over time, right, and you don't want it to be, or you're in a deficit or something like that, or it's getting smaller over time, like trends is basically what I'm getting at, can be beneficial with these sorts of things. But the DEXAs I really like because it gives you like a snapshot, and it gives you a lot more data than the few things we've talked about here. It gives you muscle mass per arm or different extremity or in different things. One thing it also does that I really like is it gives you the amount of visceral adiposity, which is a really important marker for your health type of thing. So, or concern for health, I should say. So that one thing, I really do like it. I will continue to get, I don't know, 1 to 2 a year, depending on where I'm at. I think that's 60, 70, $80 very well spent. And it is cool to just compare and see if I can continue to slowly bump up that lean tissue over time.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm going to start doing it as well, because I think I need some sort of more like tangible things to be like, yo, this is working or this is not working. So
yeah,
super cool. We had a couple questions on protein. Do you want to address these?
Yeah.
I'll kind of lay it out. So a guy who's been doing my training program for a long time, shout out to Chris Bond, but he wrote me and asked me about Aaron. So I guess he could have written Aaron, but he was like, as someone that struggled with digestion as well, has Aaron ever considered that his protein intake is too high? As I believe he stated, it's around 280 grams a day. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Of course. I can assure you my digestion issues are not related to my protein because of the types of digestion issues I get, which are generally like gas, but there's never any bloating, which is interesting, or general discomfort. So while protein can kind of exacerbate digestive issues, it's a little bit more of an upstream issue because protein is much harder to digest. It's also why we get that benefit of the thermal effect of feeding with protein. But if you're someone who's like eating and then you're getting like indigestion or acid reflux or something where it's like it's sitting in your stomach and sitting heavy and you feel like it's just digesting very, very slow, that could be, or reducing your protein intake could benefit with this. Largely could be related to insufficient hydrochloric acid in your stomach as well. Mine is never like a slow moving thing. It's always just gas kind of on the back end a few hours after. And I've gone through things, right? If I just do like very high protein vegetable meals, like a salad or something like that, olive oil, perfectly fine. I know my stuff is from carbohydrate based, specifically because of all the bacterial infections and stuff I've had from the traveling. So I present a lot of, or I would honestly say I present some SIBO issues with gas stuff, although I never have the bloating, which is why I really wouldn't kind of associate it too much with that. But I do know it's carbohydrate based, because if I have like protein fats, especially like an olive oil or something like that, I'm perfectly fine. So that is how I know it is not protein based. And then kind of as a follow-up there, with what I'm doing, I need to get calories in from somewhere. So like my fats are already pretty high. My carbohydrates are like low to moderate. I need to have that protein high for me to get sufficient calories in, or else my fat intake would have to get kind of obnoxious up into like the 170s, 180s per day, which is like having cereal and olive oil type of deal to actually hit that. And I do have one kind of last thing to wrap up around after that. But let's answer the second question and we'll circle back to the higher fat stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so there's a follow-up here, and it is, what are y'all's thoughts on protein intake in general? Some people say 1 gram per pound, some say 1.6 gram per kilo, which is about, it's under half a gram per pound. Or under 1 gram. It's like it's 3/4 of a gram per pound essentially, which is generally considered the lower end of like acceptable for building muscle and stuff like that. And then the longevity experts say 0.8 grams per kilogram, and this is the one that's under half a gram per pound. So good questions. We actually did an episode where we took a really big deep dive into this, and Aaron did a bunch of research, and we talked about like protein overfeeding studies and stuff like that. So I think it was like episode 4 or 5 or 6 or something along those lines, like way back in the day. But since it's been almost a year, I'm sure we can kind of give some updated thoughts on this, and then also from the angle of the longevity experts saying, you know, to keep it super low. Anything you want to talk about there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Everything comes down to your goals. With the goal of hypertrophy and having a physique, having muscle is completely different than the longevity experts and the like RDI, right? The RDI from the FDA on, I think it's like, I don't even know what it is because it's very, very low. Like that's just to prevent like nitrogen imbalance, basically. Very far from the goal of hypertrophy and performing in a gym, lifting weights, etc. So everything comes down to your goal, right? So let's say that we focus on the goal of hypertrophy, lifting weights, gaining strength, etc., because that's the context of the conversations Brian and I have with the podcast. There can be times, like if you are someone who is, like let's say you're just a really skinny, really lean type person, like your traditional like hard gainer, right? I'm using air quotes here. Reducing your protein a little bit, I think to just like a pound per gram
pound.
a gram per pound of body weight could be beneficial, because what you are going to run into there is hunger and satiety issues. That is your constraint. So bringing that down a little bit, because we know that protein digests slower, right? The thermic effect of feeding is higher. We want to put those in our back pocket for when it's dieting time, but now that it's gaining time, we want to leverage fats and carbohydrates more, because it's going to get you a higher caloric content and move the needle in that regard. So in that context, going a little bit lower could be beneficial. Now, that being said, when talking to a larger population, extrapolating this to a majority of people, that is not the common problem. People have more issues with trying to lose body weight, or body fat, I should say, get leaner. And from a satiety standpoint, protein will be more beneficial. From a thermic effect of feeding, you are going to oxidize more of the calories from that protein just in the digestion and assimilation process. And it's helps with muscle preservation as you go up. So it just becomes a bit of a trade-off. Now, is there an upper threshold on that? Of course. At some point, if your carbohydrates are low enough and your protein is like absurdly high, your body will just convert the proteins to a carbohydrate-based substance through a process called gluconeogenesis, and your protein just becomes an expensive carbohydrate. If you're fine with that, it is a safe way to go. Dieting gets pretty boring and you're eating just shit tons of, usually mostly animal-based protein sources. Is it effective? Yes. Is it somewhat unrealistic? Yes. Would I suggest that, which is essentially like carnivore? No, not really, but it can be an effective approach. So I guess to kind of wrap up this, rant I'm going on, it really depends on the context of your goal. And then with the goal of, say, hypertrophy, physique, etc., if your goal is gaining muscle and you're having a hard time gaining weight, going a little bit lower could be more beneficial. And then on the opposite side of that, if your goal is fat loss and, showing the physique you've now built, going a little bit higher can be more beneficial. Brian, anything you want to add on to that one?
So the fortuitous timing of this question was such that literally upon opening this Instagram message from him, I was getting an alert on my phone that Stronger by Science updated with a new episode. So I open it up. I like Stronger by Science. I'm looking through kind of what the episode's about. There's a 40-minute segment about like severe caloric restriction and protein restriction for longevity. Like literally the same time. So of course I write Chris and I'm like, hey, do you need to check this episode out? Whatever. I pull it up on my headphones. I start walking. I'm listening to it. So what I'm about to say is parroting what the Stronger by Science guys already said, but I find it super intriguing. So I think that our audience will as well. And you may not want to take the full like 40-minute deep dive into what Stronger by Science talked about. So super intriguing studies on mice where they found that the more they cut their food, the longer they lived, to the point that if they cut their food by 70%, they lived double as long. And this was like across the board. So obviously, you know, we're not mice and we don't live in a cage. And there's a number of extenuating circumstances here. Like we have things that we have to do in life. Like we have to work and we have to be social creatures and all this stuff. So we cannot cut our calories by 70%. That's ridiculous. But kind of as I was listening to it, I was thinking about like what would be like practical applications of how we could use this. And Eric Trexler, as he always does, because he's really good at his job.
I love Eric.
Kind of wrapped it up for us with similar thoughts to what I was having. And what he kind of concluded with was that having a high energy flux lifestyle is important. So you're living your life maybe not always in a bulk or trying to gain weight, but that you're maybe hanging out at maintenance or slightly below maintenance, but you're achieving this through like a high energy flux. He said, again, kind of to echo what you're saying, like protein doesn't need to be absurdly high. He was saying that most studies, when you look at like meta-analyses across like the years of studies on protein, that most of them show increases, like linear increases in muscle mass with protein intake up to about 1.4 grams per kilo. And then after that, it still continues to go up, but it's like so slow that it kind of doesn't make any difference really at all, like any significant difference. So he's like, you really could build, according to these studies, as a general population, we could build muscle with 1.4 grams per kilo and not be leaving very many gains on the table. But he didn't exactly like the idea of low protein intakes for, I think, a number of the reasons that you discussed and a number of reasons that we probably all know inherently. The first one that came to my mind was that protein allows us to keep from sarcopenia occurring as we get older. So like again, kind of comparing us to mice, like they don't have the worry of like, oh, I might fall and break something and then die this way. They're literally just living in a cage until their body stops functioning. We also have things like cardiovascular disease and things like that are benefited by exercise. So if we're cutting our calories 70%, we're not actually going to be exercising. We also have the desire to eat, whereas rats or mice apparently don't have that. They're just kind of fed the food and they eat it, but they don't sit there and they're like, oh, I'm so hungry right now. Like I wish someone would feed me some food. So realistically, I think that like we can't look at the mice studies and extrapolate much out for ourselves, but we can look at the fact that reduction in total intake, not putting our bodies and our organs through a surplus of calories for the process of digestion and all the other kind of downstream processes that go along with that. Like the more that we can decrease the burden on our body, the better off we're going to be in the long term. And you can go somewhat low on protein, but not too low if you want to maintain, muscle mass and continue potentially gaining strength over time.
Perfect way to put that. They exist in not the same parallel, right? So longevity and trying to maintain as much muscle mass as you possibly can are not like the pillars of health that meet in the middle type of thing. I think there's a reason why, you and I have been trying to chase the last 1% of our, muscle building potential for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, because from a biological standpoint, we're not meant to have this much, more muscle. Mm-hmm. There's unfortunately also a reason a lot of your like pro bodybuilders and stuff like that generally don't live very long because you're fighting your biology for a lot of these things. And, if you look at your longevity, researchers and proponents, like those people don't have a lot of muscle mass. So I think it's understanding the context and its importance there. And I think just knowing that, like if you were to tell me, Aaron, okay, you can, have this muscle mass, but you're going to die 6 years earlier or whatever, or you get those 6 years, but I have to be 160 pounds.
And hungry all the time.
I mean, not even hungry, but they're like, hey, Aaron, you got to sacrifice 30 pounds of your muscle. You're 33 years old and you'll live to like 80. Or you can keep what you have now until you're 50, which is whatever, 17 more years for me, but you die 4 years earlier or whatever. I'm probably going to be like, okay, I've drawn my line in the sand. This is the lifestyle I want to live. If that means I don't live those last few years, like I'm okay with that. But everyone is open to make that decision themselves.
I mean, I think there's also arguments too that having a certain level of muscle mass and strength is something that will help us live a longer life.
100%.
So I definitely think there's like a fine balance there. And I think that anyone that looks at these longevity studies in mice and tries to be like, cool, I'm just going to starve myself for the next 50 years and then I'm going to live till I'm 130 or something, like they're out of their fucking minds.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So
cool.
That's pretty much all I have.
The last thing, or I have two last things. So one thing was related to the dietary fat. So this weekend I was at the grocery store and I was like, you know what? I have all this extra fat in my diet. And like maybe I'll look at like some different foods and stuff. So they had tri-tip and I was like, oh my God, I used to love tri-tip. It was like my favorite cut of meat. I'm going to have some. So I buy it and I cook it. And it's way too fatty. I don't like it. So what's really wild is like over the years as I've shifted my nutrition for the purpose of like eating a lower fat, like dietary intake, my palate has changed with the types of meat. So like the tri-tip, which I used to love, I just like cooked it and I was like, this is too fatty. I don't like this. So
I can I interrupt you for a second and just talk
course.
about the tri-tip, because I eat 2 full tri-tips every week and they're not fatty at all.
Mm-hmm.
So was it fatty in that it had that massive layer of fat that covered one side of it, or was it like fatty through the meat?
I bought like the strips like already cut. Like the days of me stripping like the roast, myself, because I don't have a grill to like cook the big roast on. But it was like I chose like the least fatty one, and I was like, this, it's like, marbled through. I'm like, this should be good. And it was like, I just do not like this.
So yeah, I've never done the strips before, but the tri-tip loins that I get, like the loafs, 2 or 3 pounds or whatever, and then you grill them up. It almost seems like every time I get one, the fat, like if it's trimmed, then there's like almost no fat on it. And if it's untrimmed, then all the fat is on the backside and it's like a big layer of fat, right? So you just kind of cook it and then you can cut it off as you eat it. I very rarely, maybe 5% of the time, I get a tri-tip that actually has like fat marbled inside of it. And so I was checking out some like Googling on tri-tips or whatever, and they said that the tri-tips that don't have the marbling, which is the majority of them, it's like a 25 grams of protein to 5 grams of fat ratio. So it's like almost like, it's leaner than chicken thighs. It's like almost chicken breast.
They are pretty lean, and that's like what I would normally buy like back in San Diego, but we have like a small grill here, and I was like, I'm not even going to attempt grilling this thing. It'd be like but that's what I would do, and I would like trim them and stuff. So maybe I just did get like a batch that's like a little bit fattier than if I got like the roast, right? Those like the big kind of triangle type thing you were talking about, but we'll see. We'll see in the future, but I thought that was pretty funny. I was like, no, I used to love this, and now it's just fattier than I like for my palate.
It may have just been a bad cut. But, this also reminds me, the kiwi thing. Did you ever get after that second kiwi? So Aaron wrote me, and because I'm obsessed with kiwis, right? And he was like, yeah, I had this kiwi. I was really surprised at how sour it was. So did you try the second one yet?
I did, and it was probably equally sour, even though it was
really?
like I waited
was
like another like 4 or 5. I don't know what ripe is. I think I was probably like the first kiwi I've ever had in my life that wasn't like sliced in like a fruit basket type thing.
Yeah.
I did buy another 6 of them though for the road trip.
They are sour for sure. And I'm not even like hugely a fan of sour things, but I feel like when you let it get ripe, it's significantly less sour. And like, I know you ate it like an apple, so it changes like the perspective of what it will feel like as you consume it, right? Whereas I do the cut in half and then use a spoon to scoop it out. But you can always tell for me, like when I cut it in half and then I first stick the spoon in, if the spoon has any issue just kind of sinking in and going right to the bottom of the peel, then it's not ripe yet. And I'm like, damn it, I did it too early, you know? Whereas that spoon should sink in and it should just like get to the bottom and you should be able to easily like scoop that stuff out of there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see. The ones I think I have now I don't think they're ripe, but like how long does it take for them to ripen once you buy them?
It depends. I actually, for the first time in my life, got a basket of kiwis from Whole Foods. We did the food delivery, which I really don't like the way that they handle my fruit, because we got this batch of kiwis, and they were rock hard, like literally rock hard, to the point that I was laughing with Kim. I took one and dropped it from my waist to the ground, and it hit the ground and bounced back up. And I was like, I don't even know if these are ever going to be ripe. Like, it feels like they picked them off the tree too early or something like that. And so now it's been 2.5 weeks and they're still hard.
Damn it. That's probably the ones I got for the road trip in like 3 days.
But sometimes I get kiwis and like, you know, they're almost ready to go. And then within 2 days or 3 days, they're like perfect, you know?
Yeah, I'll have to find out. Maybe I'll just leave them in the sun in the car and see what it does to them.
There you go.
Probably
whatever,
just
man.
rot them.
Cool. Anyway, did you have a second thing, or was that?
Yes, I have one last thing. So this is just kind of like a general PSA, guys. Please, like, for everything I say, what I really want to get to the bottom of is health first, right? Please put your health first. Please go get your labs done 1 to 2 times per year. You do not know what you do not know. In the grand scheme of everything, it is very cost effective. Something that I know there's a if you want to go back, I have in search on my YouTube channel, I have an old video on it called Diminishing Subjective Well-Being. And it is the inability of you to perceive the slow decrease in your subjective well-being over time, because they are 0.5%, 1% things worse over worse. And then what feels normal now is actually like a very large dichotomy from what felt normal for you 2 to 3 years ago. So you may feel normal and fine, I'm using air quotes here, but that's just because you've been slowly sliding over time, potentially, right? I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. Just go get some labs done, get your thyroid looked at, get your sex hormones looked at, get your cortisol and things looked at, because it could be a little bit eye-opening. And especially if you've been struggling with things, go talk to your doctor, just say you want labs. And in the event that the doctor doesn't want to order you the vitamin D and the labs that you want, just know that you are empowered to go buy it yourself out of your pocket. It is very, very viable to do. Brian and I both do that ourselves. So just wanted to put that PSA out there. Please go get your lab work done.
Yeah, totally. We were actually this exact thing came up in conversation with Cass this weekend when I was there, talking about the slow degeneration of things and how it just becomes your new normal. So very convenient way to wrap that up.
Cool. Anything left from you, Brian?
No, I'll keep you guys updated on the saga of all the negative things going on in my life.
And next week I will be in Scottsdale. So
awesome.
As always, guys, thank you for listening. And Brian and I will talk to you next week.